searching for answers.
Here are today's top stories.
It's been over 24 hours.
And the local news.
What we see are a lot of things that are going on the earth.
This is Art of Heaven News Talk.
Broadcasting live from WHPC Studios in Garden City, New York. This is Art of Heaven News Talk, where we deliver global, national, and local news through the lens of faith. I'm your host, Johnny Brumit, and joining me today are my co-hosts, Mark Russak of the Russak Outlook YouTube podcast, local pastoral intern Dan Bartucci, and media personality Arnold Koekoek. If you want to join the conversation, lines are open at 516-572-7440. So let's just jump right into some crazy news this week. Probably one of the biggest headlines has to do with this guy, Elon Musk. Okay, did you hear? Tesla shareholders have passed and voted. They spoke with their vote that he is getting a $46 billion payout. Can you believe this? There's a lot to this story. We're gonna cover it all, starting out here on Art of Heaven News Talk. So it looks like the Tesla shareholders, they voted. He's getting a payout. It doesn't mean he's getting cashed out. It means that he owns about $46 billion in shares, right? And he can't even turn around and sell them because of the requirements and all. But it's pretty interesting story. Like, where do we start with this? First off, is it okay with each of you for an individual to have $46 billion?
You know, these publicly traded companies are set up with voting regulations and give the power and the rights to the shareholders to make this. So I don't have an issue. I mean, it's better than cash. He's vested in the company. I know people have a lot of judgments about Elon Musk, I think. But what he's done for his company is aligned to what the shareholders want. And by the way, those shareholders are equally invested because as the price and the value of the company goes up, that helps their wallets too. So I'm okay with it.
I mean, this is a guy, he started Tesla.
Hey, just a quick observation. I see a lot more Teslas on the road today than I have.
And some Cybertrucks are out there now rolling too. Here, yeah.
I mean, they didn't just vote. They didn't vote. They actually gave a standing ovation after it was passed.
So they're happy with him.
Yep.
Yeah, and so, if somebody's value is whatever price someone is willing to pay, right? So who are we, or who is anyone, to put a limit on what that value could be? You would have to have good reasons, I would think.
So the reason this is a big story here, right, is because this little curveball was thrown at it by a Delaware judge. Basically shut it down. Said, nah, he can't get this payout. And it's still in effect. But the shareholders voted and said, nah, he can. So now they're going to revisit the judge's decision.
Yeah, I think that's what you're saying, Arnold, right? There's a question of worth, and we have to separate it. So as a room full of believers here in this radio station today, right, we have to separate this from our worth is what we believe, as believers, and the worth in business. I think the challenge that I would have, with that judge's ruling is then, well, then how do you determine a financial worth for somebody running a company? So let's just hypothetically say the president of Moderna comes out next week and finds some kind of cure for some kind of incurable disease. What's his stock package? Can he go higher than Elon Musk? Like, how do we value this? Again, I don't really have an issue with the way the public markets operate. Arnold, to your point, there's a question of worth of a human being and an individual. And if we go back to scripture as we all want to, right, that's not measured in treasures or talents.
Well, let me just make the point too. Follow up on that. Money is amoral, meaning money does not have morals, right? Meaning, let's say money is like a brick. I can take a brick and I can throw it through a glass window, or I could take a brick and I could build a hospital. It's really the person who is in charge of that money.
Yeah, if you want to look at it from a scriptural standpoint, a lot of people will twist it. They'll say money is the root of all evil. That's not what the scriptures say. It says the love of money is the root. So if you're obsessed with it, if you're taking it to that degree, that's where you can kind of get off kilter. At the same time, you can use money as a tool for good and to help and benefit one another. And that's why I think you see a lot of the more wealthier people are more philanthropic.
Yeah, that's close enough. I think that's close enough. Yeah. I'm not even going to try it live, but I think you got
Say
it.
that 3 times real fast.
I mean, generous people, they're just more attractive, it's said.
Okay.
Like you get given the blessing of managing a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And you turn around and be stingy with it, it's just not very like...
But also, the gospel will teach it's better to give than to receive.
Yes.
So we're here, we're giving, we would like to say give the message of the gospel and give, but at the same time, we also, as believers, like to feed the hungry, clothe the poor, give to the less fortunate. And, for me personally, my opinion, I love the feeling of being able to give and help somebody else.
Yeah. But and then we also have to guard ourselves too, right? We can't necessarily go around as believers and pass judgment about what others are doing or try to measure what they're doing from a charitable perspective. And again, I think to the point of Elon Musk, he's a polarizing human being.
Yeah, he's
in a lot of areas. And while I don't personally see chunks of cash he's given, he's put up internet in the poorest areas of Africa. He's doing telemedicine in Africa through Starlink, right? NASA didn't have a way to get astronauts to the space station, right, till SpaceX starts launching. So I'm not judging his moral character. I shouldn't as a believer.
Right.
But it's not all just Teslas, which I know some people get burnt about because it's for not a different class of people, but it's for wealthier people, let's be honest, right? You and I are probably not going out today, Johnny, and buying a Cybertruck for cash.
Well, I think you got to have a home kind of to charge that thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not like we got charges everywhere either. So there's a point there. But let's spin off this conversation into your point. What good is he doing? I mean, this guy started SpaceX. He's the 3rd richest person in the world with over a net worth of over $203 billion. So he's trying to, his big passion though recently is self-driving cars. Okay.
Yeah.
So to me, that's kind of good in a way, if it can be done, because I'm sick of traffic, and I kind of envision these cars like on the magnetic little games that cars used to cruise through, and those you know what I mean? Maybe what if the world was like that? Put a magnetic strip in the middle of the street.
The foundation for that is artificial intelligence, and you can say the same thing. That can be used for good. It can be used for evil. The time will tell, and you could flip this too for Elon. He's got Neuralink. He's got experiments going where he's put a chip in a human brain.
Yeah.
And then from scripturally, you look at that and you go, okay, well, that could not be good down the road.
So he can be considered as a visionary. And I want to ask you, though, is it necessarily bad to be a visionary?
No.
I think it's good.
What do you think of that word, Dan?
I try to put faces to names when you think of that word. But again, I think you have to... Do we know the character Henry Ford? Right? Henry Ford changed the industry, and he's got a great quote, right? Henry Ford is like, if I listened to the people, they would ask for faster horses, right? They wouldn't have asked for building cars. So some visionaries are crazy. Or do they have flaws? Probably. But when you're talking about things like self-driving cars, I trust the technology in a Tesla more than I do a 17-year-old kid that's streaming on TikTok, driving down the LIE, or somebody that's just come out of happy hour, at one of the beach bars down South Shore, right? We're getting better. He's a visionary, but again, I want to park that between human worth, right? What gets accomplished here on this planet, which may be for some good, versus our worth when we talk about our worth in Christ and who we are.
Store for yourselves treasures in heaven.
That's right.
Where moth and rust do not destroy.
Yeah.
Right?
But imagine this, though, right? There's if we're already having, I would call it government overreach, or judge overreach, I guess, law overreach, trying to determine what the monetary value or compensation. It's not the value of the person, really. It's the compensation for what the job that the person is doing. If that's already being overreached, imagine what needs to happen to have self-driving cars and have that considered to be a legal option, right? Because so far what I've seen is, we'll assist you driving, but you're still responsible. You need to be able to jump in at any given time, which isn't going to help people with, blind people, vision problems, or just people that have cognitive issues. So for that true value to come out, there's a lot of laws that probably will need to change, and some willingness to not have such a government overreach.
It's a great point. They say that there has to be a person ready to intervene in this self-driving car behind the wheel, right? Like, for me personally, I call it the Jesus grab the wheel moment, right?
You should write a song.
Yeah, maybe that might be top 40. But John, you got on a plane this week, right?
Yes, I did.
Okay. How much automation and computer autopilot do you think was on your 2.5-3 hour flight?
I don't know. Was the
significant amount,
pilot,
though.
was he sleeping? Was he taking a nap the whole trip?
No, same thing. Probably ready to intervene. But, I mean, that's made aviation safer.
You know,
I think
I did get away this week for a couple days, and it was awesome. And I actually came across an individual. It made me think about it with what you were saying, Mark, about he was an ENT, the ear, nose, and throat doctor. And he goes, and I was just asking about the area. What's it like down here? He's like, you know what? No matter where you go, he's like, if you're chasing after money, he's like, you're never going to be satisfied. He's like, just enjoy what you're doing wherever you are. And it kind of spoke. I'll never forget that guy.
Yeah, it's an old expression, love what you do and the money will follow.
Ooh,
True.
I like that. Does ministry follow money or money follow ministry?
ministry follows Christ alone. That's the only way you're going to get in.
Amen.
Nice. So we'll see what happens with this Elon Musk ordeal. But also this week, here in Art of Heaven News Talk, I'm going to talk about this next story I think is pretty important because it can be ground changing. It could be heading our nation in a different direction with what happened in North Dakota. The voters just approved a new age limit for congressional candidates. Mm-hmm. Okay, now the way I understand this is you can not be 81 years old and in Congress, correct? And meaning like if your term starts and then you turn that age within the term, you're out. So point is, people in their late 70s or older cannot run for Congress in North Dakota.
And I think a lot of this has been driven by what we see today. The talks are about the presidential election, the age of the two candidates, the potential compromise that we're seeing on. I'm trying to be patient or trying to be fair to our commander in chief, but let's just say that he has exhibited some cognitive decline.
Yeah, we've seen a lot, right? These are the types of things that make news, right? Even on the other side of the aisle, right? We watched Mitch McConnell freeze a bunch of times. Dianne Feinstein was in office for 400 years.
Exactly.
It might have been at the Continental Congress, I think she might have been. She was at it for a while. But you have to question that. The powers to you and I as the voter.
Yeah.
But there's definitely some concern.
Yeah, but it's still age discrimination, right? So at the end of the day, to see if someone has the cognitive powers, you could run tests. There's other ways to solve this problem. So what if you have a very fit 81-year-old? Some 81-year-olds are more fit than someone in their late 50s. How do you compare? And I think, in the onset of like Alzheimer's or other mental diseases could kick in much earlier in life. So I don't think it solves necessarily the problem, but also on a more constitutional level, you're basically opening the door to age discrimination. So where does it end?
Yeah,
it's a good point.
I like your point. I kind of leaning towards what you're thinking, Arnold. Like, why put a cap to somebody? Maybe run the test. Like if you're making a will with somebody like on their deathbed at 80, 90 years old, they come in and give them a test, a cognitive test, right? And then there's the other thing, like, the wisdom of our elders.
Yep.
Like, I'd necessarily trust, I think I'd trust an 80-year-old more than an 8-year-old, that's for sure. But even a 20, 30-year-old, some of these, because what does the proverb say, Gray hair is a sign of wisdom, right? So we'll see what happens with this North Dakota vote. See if it changes the game.
Yep.
And it all stems back on your point with what's going on with Biden in the White House. I mean, you can't avoid.
We saw that on full display with the G7 summit the other day, and he just started to drift back. And the Italian, I'm not sure if it's prime minister or president, but she had to kind of like gently roll him back into where he was. And the press, even in Europe right now, is coming out and saying, he's not there. People have been reporting that in meetings he'd be focused for a little while, then seem to drift. So, it's not only in terms of what we're seeing here in America, but let's face it, America is very important on the world stage, and the world is watching.
Absolutely. You're listening to Art of Heaven News Talk on 90.3 WHPC. If you want to join the conversation, you can call us up at 516-572-7440. Now, there's been a lot of news this past week in Israel.
Yep.
They got some hostages.
Yeah.
They saved some hostages.
Four hostages were rescued, and it's fortunate that they were able to rescue them, but they found out that they were being kept in Al Jazeera press homes, apartments that were in the Gaza Strip. So they were holding them. There was roughly 100 to 200 guards surrounding the perimeter in the area. So it was a very, very difficult task to pull off. They had been working on it for about 2 months. But thank God they got them. But what's interesting to me is the world's reaction. So here you rescued 4 hostages, and what is the world saying? Oh, how many people were killed?
It was a bad thing. Yeah.
They're just, so it's just over the top obvious, the anti-Semitism that's just breaking out around the world.
Now, on top of that, it looks like they struck a Lebanese leader.
Yes, well, that's in the north.
Yeah, what about that story?
So over the last couple of days, you have hundreds of missiles coming across. You have drone. I think they said 15 to 20 drones the Israelis were able to shoot down. And what's not being reported a lot, since this broke out in October, over 70,000 people who live in northern Israel are displaced. They're living, further south, hotels, where, people maybe putting them up and whatever. So this is really, it's biblical. This should not take, for people who are Christians or Jewish and are reading the Bible, this should not take us by surprise, because we see these signs, and this has been prophesied, where they will be surrounded by their enemies, and that's really what we're seeing. It's the early stages. I'm not saying we're in the book of Revelation by any means, but we are potentially seeing a foreshadow of what is to come.
Man, it's pretty hectic over there.
Oh, it's horrible, and at the same time, Benny Gantz, who was the in the war cabinet with them, he just stepped down, walked away, and rumor has it that he's been negotiating with the Americans. They're trying to get to the 2-state solution. They're trying to shut down this war right now before Israel achieves its objectives in eliminating Hamas. So, and again, this is all foretold, where God said He will judge these people who are dividing His land. Israel is the only nation in the Bible that God created. Every other nation, the man created by themselves. He calls Israel the apple of His eye. Not that they're without fault, not that they're without blemish. We all have our faults.
For sure.
We're fallen. We're men, and women. But I would say Jesus said, when you see these signs, look up. Your redemption draws nigh. We don't know.
I think what I found troubling as this has played out, right, since October, since the fall of last year, is there's always been protests, and and we want peaceful existence for all humans, right? Every human being carries the image of God, right? And we have to believe that. Even those that haven't come to faith yet are still image bearers of God. But I think what's disturbing more and more, and what's accelerating more and more, certainly here, I think locally, is it's not, well, we want Palestinians to be free, or we want the Palestinian people to have a safe environment. It's people are going pro-Hamas.
Yeah.
Without realizing what it means to be pro-Hamas. You are pro-terrorism. You are pro for the destruction and death of an entire race, which, by the way, has tried to happen once before. And even what's more fascinating, I'll just make this one last point.
You're right on.
Are the people that are pro-Hamas, right, are marginalized if they lived in Gaza under Hamas rule. In fact, some of their supporters, right, would be imprisoned, would be executed. We don't realize, so many young adults do not realize what it means when they go out and they say, I'm pro-Hamas. It's not coming out and saying, hey, we want life, we don't want war. None of us want war, right? But when you say you're pro-Hamas, you are saying something very different And we've seen this play out in history in the last couple of years. That's, I think, what's frightening.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's in their charter to eliminate the Jews. It's in the Hamas charter. It's right out in public.
Yeah, no, I did. I read that. Now, I want to highlight your point, though. Israel is the apple of God's eye, right? And when that makes me think about, like, when some little, like, shar or something flies in your eye and your whole entire body reacts to it. Like, our bodies are wired to protect our eyes.
Yep.
So if there's danger coming at our eyes, I mean, it's like our whole body goes in defense mode. Now, I mean, that's just, when you say that point, it makes me think of that. Like, wow.
Yeah, well, I would just say thank the Lord that he is patient, because
With all of us.
With all of us, yeah, absolutely. Because judgment eventually will come. And this can only go on for so long, and it happens to all of us. But there's two ways of looking at this. I have an excitement in the sense of, boy, we're living in very unique and special times. And at the same time, there's a heightened sense in me to share the gospel, because let's face it, we don't know if Jesus is coming back tomorrow, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. We don't know. But the more we see these signs, and there will be a reckoning, whether you believe in Jesus or not, you will come to see him. And the Word of God says, every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. So you want to be on the right side of eternity, and that's my heart.
Man, this whole war, though, it's got to come to an end somehow. I mean, I don't think it's gonna. Obviously, the Word says it's not.
Well, if you look at what the Bible has to say, it won't.
Yeah,
and all roads go back there.
Right.
Let me just rephrase that. I know it's not going to come to an end by what anti-Israel protesters did to the director of that Brooklyn Museum's home. Did you see that?
That was horrible. Go
this
ahead.
past week, they went in and they spray painted red, looking like blood, on her front door. They put a big banner. I mean, this is a director of a museum.
Yeah.
And they call it peaceful protest, which is...
Yeah.
And that was really what they came out and said. You're right,
It's
Arnold.
peaceful.
Yeah.
I wish I could attribute, because I read it and I made the mistake of not catching who said it, but somebody made a great quote about it and said, if you have to take any time to explain how your protest was peaceful, it wasn't a peaceful protest.
Yeah,
That's great.
the point.
Yeah.
And whoever's out there, if I just quoted you, I'm sorry. I will give you credit as soon as I find you. That's not me.
It was actually in the article mentioned as a commentator or something.
Okay,
So there was no actual name mentioned.
But it makes sense.
But it makes sense to say that, because it's really, you're messing with somebody's home. You look at home as a safe place, and you go there and people mess with it. It gets you uncomfortable, right? It instills fear, and it's just not a good thing to do, and it's far from peaceful at all.
And you look at the times we're living in. Everybody's personal information is out there. So this director, they can get their name, address. It's the same thing. We've seen some things in the past with judges, with court officials, politicians, celebrities. It's dangerous. Where information is so freely accessible.
It just makes me think. Like, I had this whole revelation driving through this country this week. Through like the hills of Tennessee and Virginia and Pennsylvania and all. And I thought about it. I said, we have so much to be grateful for in this country.
Absolutely.
Okay? Like, imagine some world power. So one of these other countries, I won't mention any of them. We all know the big ones, right? Invading the United States. I mean, it's not a pretty picture. They're going to hit major targets. I don't mean to go in this morbid direction, but I'm just being real for a minute. Thank God for your life today in this, because put yourself in the shoes of some of these Israeli, Palestinian, even Lebanese people getting missiles and rockets shot at you. That's pretty wild.
Well, look, let's face it. We have our southern border is under attack. We don't know the people that are coming in there. We just find out 2 days ago that Russia has submarines 90 miles off.
We're going to have the new Cuban Missile Crisis.
So to your point, let's not take this for granted. Let's enjoy the day and the freedoms that we have now.
And I would just say, and the freedom that what we have here, right? You can have a news show. You can talk about Christ. You can talk about Scripture. There are people doing more missionaries. They're printing Bibles in their basement in other countries to get it in. So not only do we have the freedom, not only are we forced, Mark, to your point, into shelters and hotels because our country's at war, we have the ability to practice our faith too. And we can't take any of this for granted.
Amen. Definitely do not take this country for granted, especially, and I'm going to break it down here in Art of Heaven News Talk, when we got issues like Wells Fargo employees faking their keyboard strokes. Did you hear about this? Wells Fargo fired a dozen people this week because they were accused of using a mouse jiggler.
Yeah, well, it's a sad story because, I mean, I've worked from home for decades, and I just think they got the wrong management system, right? I mean, what you really should be doing as a manager is set goals for the year and then set sub-targets like, this you're going to accomplish in this quarter, that quarter, that quarter, and you either hit the goals or you don't hit the goals. But if you don't hit the goals, then that affects your performance review. But it shouldn't be like, was your mouse moving at all times? Did you look out the window when you heard a dog barking? Or, it shouldn't be that. And in fact, it's actually very healthy to go out for a jog or just to take a break here and there. So it's to me, it's the wrong management system. And if that's what you have to resort to, you missed the mark on figuring this out.
I mean, spot on, Arnold.
Yeah. By the way, another Simpsons prediction, if anybody remembers the episode where Homer Simpson bought the drinking bird that would just peck the Y button on his keyboard. This is a great Simpsons prediction. I'm telling you, it's out there, guys. Just pay attention to what they're writing.
How did they do it? How did Simpsons
we go from Art of Heaven to the Simpsons. There we go.
We covered a lot of ground today.
Hey, it's bad enough. Like, this country's a mess. It's so hard. The working conditions. We can work in our underwear. What? Come on. What are you complaining
I'm glad you have pants on for the show.
Yeah, I was going to say.
In a Zoom meeting, if you get up unexpectedly, it might be.
Listen,
I wouldn't recommend it.
The day that I could work in my pajamas at home, the day I stand up and say, I have made it. This is Art of Heaven News Talk on 90.3 WHPC.
Have a great week, everyone.
Yeah, good weekend.
Thank you, fellas, for joining me today. Every Friday, 3:30 to 4. 90.3 WHPC. God bless.